the hard truth is that we have failed to ensure we remain below 1.5 degrees. Science now tells us that the temporary overshoot between the 1.5 limit, starting at the latest in the early 2030s, is inevitable. We need a paradigm shift to limit this overshoot's magnitude and duration and quickly drive it down. Even a temporary average overshoot will have dramatic consequences. It could push ecosystems past irreversible tipping points, expose billions to unlivable conditions, and amplify threats to peace and security. Every fraction of a degree means more hunger, displacement, and loss, especially for those least responsible. This is moral failure and deadly negligence. Yes, the newly submitted nationally determined contributions represent progress, but they still fall short of what is needed. Even if fully implemented, they would put us on a pathway well above 2 degrees of global warming. Meanwhile, the climate crisis is accelerating. Record-breaking wildfires, deadly floods, superstorms, shattering lives, economies, and decades of progress. Last year, emissions reached another record high. And today, as we have seen, the World Meteorological Organization confirmed that the emissions continue to rise this year. Let us be clear, the 1.5 degrees limit is a red line for humanity. It must be kept within reach. And scientists also tell us that this is still possible. If we act now at speed and scale, we can make the overshoot as small, as short, and as safe as possible, and bring temperatures back below 1.5 degrees Celsius before century's end. Small, by peaking global emissions immediately, cutting them deeply this decade, accelerating the phase-out of fossil fuels, slashing methane, and safeguarding forests and oceans, nature's carbon sinks. Short, by reaching global net zero by 2050 and moving swiftly to sustain net negative emissions afterwards. And safe, by drastically increasing investments in adaptation and resilience and delivering early warnings for all by 2027. Excellencies, the United Nations will not give up on the 1.5 degrees goal. Because another truth is evident. We have never been better equipped to fight back. A clean energy revolution has taken hold. Solar and wind are now the cheapest sources of power and the fastest growing sources of electricity in history. Last year, almost all new power capacity came from renewables. The clean energy economy is creating jobs and driving development. It is reshaping geopolitics, delivering energy security and price stability. And it is connecting millions to clean and affordable energy for the first time. The economics have shifted. In 2024, investors poured $2 trillion into clean energy, 800 billion more than fossil fuels. Clean energy is winning in price, performance, and potential, offering the solutions to transform our economies and protect our populations. What is still missing is political courage. Fossil fuels still command vast subsidies, taxpayers' money. Too many corporations are making record profits from climate devastation, with billions spent on lobbying, deceiving the public, and obstructing progress. And too many leaders remain captive to these entrenched interests. Too many countries are starved of the resources to adapt and locked out of the clean energy transition. And too many people are losing hope that their leaders will act. We need to move faster and move together. And this COP must ignite a decade of acceleration and delivery. First, countries must agree on a bold and credible response plan to close the NDC ambition gap to 1.5 degrees. Common but differentiated responsibilities must apply, but that should not be an excuse for any country not to assume its fair share. This means supercharging renewables, electrification, and energy efficiency, building modern grids and large-scale storage, halting and reversing deforestation by 2030, cutting methane emissions, and setting near-term 1-5-aligned coal phase-out schedules. I've consistently advocated against more coal plants or fossil fuel exploration and expansion. At COP28 in Dubai, countries committed to transition away from fossil fuels. No more greenwashing, no loopholes. We must turn that committing into action while supporting low and middle income developing countries that are highly dependent on fossil fuels. And we must also dismantle structural barriers and provide the conditions for developing countries to deliver and exceed their NDC commitments. Trade and investment policies must support climate ambition, not undermine it. Second, we must demonstrate a clear and credible path to reaching the $1.3 trillion a year in climate finance for developing countries by 2035, as agreed at COP29 in Baku. Developed countries must take the lead in mobilizing $300 billion annually, delivering affordable, predictable finance at the agreed scale. And all providers must show they will contribute to meeting the $300 billion and $1.3 trillion milestones. It's no longer time for negotiations. It's time for implementation, implementation, implementation. With independent tracking, faster disbursement, and terms that reflect climate vulnerability, including debt relief. And third, developing countries must leave Belem equipped with a climate justice package that delivers equity, dignity, and opportunity. That means the concrete plan to close the adaptation finance gap, ensuring that developed countries honor their pledge to provide $40 billion adaptation finance by the end of this year, and giving confidence that affordable adaptation finance will be scaled up beyond 2025 and delivered swiftly to the communities on the front lines. It also means placing justice at the heart of the transition, with concrete measures to support developing countries to navigate it, protecting workers, empowering communities, and creating new opportunities, and significant contributions and simplified access to the loss and damage fund. A just transition also means indigenous peoples leading the way. Their knowledge and full participation light the path to a livable planet. Excellencies, you can count on the United Nations. Through our climate promise, over 100 developing countries received support in the preparation of the new nationally determined contributions. I've directed the United Nations Development Programme to build on this architecture and work across the system to support developing countries during the implementation plan. The challenge is immense, but the choices are clear. No one can bargain with physics, but we can choose to lead or be led to ruin. Choose to make Belem the turning point, stand with science, stand for justice, stand for future generations, and I thank you.
Agradecemos.
We would like to thank the General Secretary from the UN for his message. And at the moment, we will hear the President of the Federative Republic of Brazil, Mr. Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva.
First of all, I would like to greet the Secretary General of the United Nations, our dear friend Antonio Guterres. I also would like to greet King Carl Gustav and Queen Sylvia from Sweden, on behalf of which I would like to greet on their behalf all heads of delegation, all heads of state and government in this conference. I'd like to greet the Speaker of the House of the Senate, my brother Al Columbri. I also would like to greet the Speaker of the House of Representatives, Hugo Monta. I'd like to greet Mr. Fachin, that is the Chief Justice of the Supreme Court of Brazil. I also would like to greet my Foreign Affairs Minister, Mauro Vieira, and my sister, Marina Silva, who is the Environment Minister of Brazil, for which, on her behalf, I greet all the ministers, state ministers that came with me, and the Ambassador Lago, that is the president or chairs COP30. I also would like to greet Mukitav Sipafaez, that is the, and also like to greet the partner of this journey and friend, Elder Barbalho, that is the governor of the state of Pará, and to greet my dear wife, Janja. After more than 30 years after the Earth Summit in Rio, the Climate Convention comes back to the country where it was born. Today, the eyes of the world are now looking towards Belem with great expectation. For the first time in history, a climate COP will take place in the heart of the Amazon. In the global imaginary, there's no higher symbol of the environmental cause than the Amazon forest. Here we have thousands of rivers and igarapés that make up the largest hydro basin in the planet. Here live thousands of species of plants and animals that are part of the most diverse biome in the earth. Here live millions of people and hundreds of indigenous people where their lives are faced by a false dilemma between prosperity and preservation. So they are the ones that daily they put together the way they live and seeking for existence and livelihood that is legitimate and with dignity and with the main mission to protect one of the highest cultural heritage of humanity, that is the nature. So it's fair to say that it's now the time, it is the time of the people of the Amazon to ask what is being done by the rest of the world to avoid the collapse of their house. Multilateralism and the Paris Agreement in the year of 2025, that's a landmark for multilateralism. We celebrate 80 years of the foundation of the United Nations Organization and 10 years of the adoption of the Paris Agreement. The strength of the Paris Agreement resides in the respect of the protagonism of each country in defining their own goals in the light of their national domestic capacities. After 1 decade, it has become the mirror of the best qualities and also limitations of multilateral actions. Thanks to that agreement, we've got away from those forecasts that would predict the increase in 5 degrees the average global temperature to the end of the century. So we proved that collective action brings results. But the climate regime is not immune to the rationale of the zero-sum game that has prevailed in the international order. In a scenario of insecurity and mutual mistrust, selfish immediate interests prevail over the common good for the long term. And the year 24 was the first year where the average temperature of the Earth has went beyond 1.5 degrees above the pre-industrial levels. Science shows us that this rise will extend itself during a period or even decades, but we cannot abandon the objectives of the Paris Agreement. The emissions report of the Program of the United Nations for Environment estimates that the planet is moving towards to reach 2.5 degrees hotter till the year 2100. So according to the roadmap Baku-Belem, human losses and material losses would be drastic. More than 250,000 people can die each year. The global GDP could get smaller in 30%, can shrink to 30%. That's why COP3 will be the COP of truth. It is now the moment to take it seriously, all the warnings of science. Now we have to face reality and decide if we will have or not the courage and necessary determination to transform things. The objectives of Brazil now that I would like to say. For Brazil, COP30 would be the ultimate point of a road that was paved during our chairmanships of the G20 and the BRICS. At the G20, we put on the negotiation table all the environmental and finance ministries of the 20 largest economies that answer for 80% of global emissions. They have that share. So that's why we believe that the centrality of climate finance, capacity building, and technology transfer. This Leaders Summit meeting is an innovation that we bring to the universe of COPs. The convergences are already well known. Our common objective will be to face the divergences. We, leaders, we can and should discuss everything beyond the walls of the convention. The words said here will be a compass of the journey that we should follow by our delegations during the next 2 weeks. Humanity is aware of the impact of the climate change for more than 35 years, since the publication of the first report from IPCC. But it was necessary 28 conferences to recognize for the first time in Dubai the need to get rid of fossil fuel and to stop and reverse the deforestation. It was necessary an additional year so that we could admit in Baku the prospect of enhancing climate financing up to $1.3 trillion. Belem will honor the legacy of COPs 28 and 29. To accelerate energy transition and protect nature are two different ways that are more effective to contain global warming. I am convinced that although we face difficulties and contradictions, we need the roadmaps to plan in a fair way, reverse the deforestation, overcome the dependency on fossil fuel, and mobilize the necessary resources to reach these objectives. Now, to advance, we need to overcome two mismatches. The first mismatch is the lack of connection between the diplomatic saloons and the actual world. People cannot understand what are emissions or metric tons of carbon, but everybody knows how they feel pollution. Maybe the common ordinary citizen may not understand what are the sinks of carbon sinks and regulating climate, but they recognize the value of the forests and the oceans. Maybe people, common people, maybe they not understand concessional financing or mixed financing, but they know that nothing could be done without resources. Maybe they can't manage to assimilate the meaning of the increase of 1.5 degrees of the global temperature, but they suffer the drought, floods, and hurricanes. To fight the climate change should be the core of the decisions that are being made by each government, by each private company, and each person in the planet. The concept of collective work, that translated the word mutirão, translated to collective for effort in showing the common objective with the spirit to build momentum in Belem. With the civil society participation and engagement of subnational governments, that will be crucial. We will be inspired by the indigenous peoples and by the traditional communities, for which sustainability will always be a synonymous of livelihood. Now we have to overcome inequalities. The second mismatch is the decoupling between the geopolitical context and the climate urgencies. Extremist forces fabricate fake news and to obtain electoral gains and imprison future generations of a model that should be overcome, and that shows us perpetual social and economic disparities and environmental degradation. Strategic rivalries, armed conflicts that deviate the attention and drain the resources that should be channeled to confront global warming. My dear friends, meanwhile, the opportunity window that is open for us to act is closing quickly. Climate change is the result of the same dynamics that during centuries has broken our societies and split our societies between rich and poor, and split the world between developed countries and developing countries. It will be impossible to contain climate change without overcoming inequalities within the nations and between the nations. Climate justice is an ally of fighting hunger and poverty in the struggle against racism, gender inequality, and the promotion of a global governance that will be more representative and more inclusive. Dear friends, amongst the indigenous people, Yanomami, that live in the Amazon, there's a belief that each human being to sustain heaven so that heaven would not fall over earth. This perspective, the indigenous people, gives us the measure of our responsibility vis-a-vis our planet Earth, mainly vis-a-vis the most vulnerable people. But also, it recognizes the power to expand horizons that is in our hands. We have to embrace a new development model with much more fairness, resilient, and of low carbon. I hope that this summit will contribute to push the heaven up and to enhance our vision beyond what we see today. My dear friends, I would like, before I end my speech, I would like to ask you that we have to thank the willingness to hold this COP in the Amazon region. A lot of people did not believe that it would be possible to bring to the state of in the Amazon a COP meeting, because people are more accustomed to have parades in big cities, developed cities, and we decided that the Amazon for the world is like the Bible. Everybody knows that they exist and interprets each one their own way. And we wanted that this conference, that the Amazon, that people should come here to see what is the Amazon like, the people of the Amazon, how it is the life inside the Amazon, and to see the climate in the Amazon. And I want to end saying to a round of applause, please, for all those that helped to build this space here, all the workers that built the space that we're having this conference. And that's how we're going to receive the COP. A great hug to all of you, and good luck to all of you.
Agradecemos a mensagem.
We would like to thank the President of the Federal Republic of Brazil, Luiz Inácio Lula da Silva, for his words. The agenda provides for each head of state and government to give a 5-minute speech, after which we will move to the representatives of international organizations who will have 3 minutes each. The list of speakers is organized in alphabetical order and by presidents, taking into account also the agenda of each delegation. The first country that will speak today will be Chile, represented by President Gabriel Boric. Good morning. It is difficult to speak in this Leaders Summit after President Lula because of the tremendous leadership that he expels through all his ports and which convenes us, many other leaders of the world, to do the same. We know that these are difficult times that put to the test our ability to work collectively as leaders, as international community, as mankind. What is at stake may be the biggest challenge for our generation, which is to sustain life on Earth. A while ago, I was lucky and happy enough to become a father. My daughter is 4 months old now. And when I see her in these 4 innocent months in which she is learning to smile, I have to wonder what type of world we will be leaving for this generation. And I cannot avoid feeling a tremendous sense of responsibility and concern, because as President Lula said, as Antonio Guterres said, the time is now. And this is because a decade after the Paris Agreement, we have to recognize that as mankind, we have not been up to par in the agreements that are supposed to combat climate change. And I remember that night in 2015, where we were called to mind with the hammer the conclusions that we might take. We had hope that we would be able to reach an agreement. As such, we have to stand away from resignation and pessimism, because today we are here more than to commit with new targets, to be clear in how we will fulfill the targets that we have already set, because the consequences of not doing so are truly catastrophic. And allow me to give you an example of that, which the president of the UN once said. If the temperature rises by 2 degrees, this means that more than 400 million people will face food insecurity. Now, if this increases to 4 degrees, 1,800 billion people will face food insecurity, and by that I mean hunger. The consequences of not acting now, of not observing our own commitments, is the death of many, is famine of many people, real people that should move us into action. What reflections do we bring to you from Chile? In the first place, this requires a great leadership, a leadership that is complex, because those of us who are in a position of power, we are judged on the whole for what we do and for what we transform, but it is very rare that we are evaluated on what we are able to avoid. And in this case, we are in an existential fight to avoid something, the increase of the world's temperature. And this will probably not gain us a lot of applause or votes, but it's a leadership that is most requested, most required right now, a leadership that is committed and that fulfills its promises. And from that standpoint, to begin with, we say that science and scientific evidence need to continue to be in the center of our decisions. It was science that recommended a multilateral sphere like this Conference of the Party, and it's science that guides us in relation to the paths we need to walk. And it's important to say that today, although it seems obvious, because these are times in which voices are rising that are deciding to ignore or to deny the scientific evidence on the climate crisis. Without going further, the President of the United States in the last UN Assembly said that the climate crisis does not exist, and that is a lie. And we need to be capable of reivindicating the value of science and facts, because we might have legitimate discussions about how to face these things, but we cannot deny them. And that requires the leadership of the international community. In second place, we receive with enthusiasm and responsibility the call of Brazil to advance towards implementation, no longer diagnosis, but implementation. And I tell you humbly that in Chile, that is what we're doing. First of all, we are one of the 68 countries that have delivered within the allotted times its NDCs. Also, we have been implementing many public policies that from our country are changing the quality of life of our citizens. 10 years ago, we did not have electric buses, but today, this year, we basically have 60% of our buses in our capital city electric. Santiago of Chile is a city outside of China with more e-buses in the world, and we are expanding our fleet to other regions. Likewise, in 10 years, a percentage of electricity that comes from renewables rose from 5 to 35%, and the proportion of carbon dropped to less than 11%. Chile is a country that is not among the big emitters worldwide, but we know that we also have to do our part, and we are advancing in that direction. That is why we invite you to join the initiatives fostered by Brazil with the leadership of President Lula in the Belem Declaration about hunger, poverty, and climate action focused on people, and a call to action for integrated fire management worldwide, a phenomenon that has affected very strongly our lands. This new stage also requires more funding, and this COP should send clear political signals so that the donors, the donor countries, the big investors, and all the actors of the international financial architecture understand, and this is important, that is no profitability possible in a world that continues to warm. Investments are long-term, and the long-term will cease to exist if we do not act and implement things now. Climate finance today will, of course, increase the debt of developing countries. However, we cannot forget the consequences that climate change has on the most vulnerable populations, especially women and indigenous peoples, and local communities that have had to face unproportionate environmental burdens in the name of progress. As such, from Chile, we think that we should support the new plan on gender so that our climate policies recognize that this crisis affects differently women and children, especially girls. To conclude, developing countries, the ones that live this inequality every day, say that it's not enough for this transition to be accelerated. It also needs to be just. And the countries that for a long time benefited from an accelerated development, polluting the world with impunity, today need to be more responsible than the rest. This just transition should be expressed in other communities also, so that multilateralism makes sense for our basis, so that it makes sense for those we represent. The challenge of decarbonization, as the Global South shows, is united in search of economic development that leads to a better quality of life to women, a better quality of jobs, more land equity, and a safe and healthy environment in which to live. This is not just a matter of justice. It's a way of adding legitimacy to action, which is so important. especially for our democracies. Mr. President, COP30 in Latin America and the Caribbean, in the heart of the Amazon, the reserve for humanity. This is an opportunity to deepen our mission with a call to action, with commitments that are measurable as to how we will deploy the targets that we ourselves as mankind have established. Thank you very much. Thank you for your kind words. And now we would like to call on the representative of China, the Vice Prime Minister Ding Shuaishuan.
Good morning. It gives me great pleasure to attend the Belem Climate Summit as a special representative of Chinese President Xi Jinping. First of all, I have the honor to convey the best wishes from President Xi Jinping to Brazil for hosting this summit. President Xi Jinping highly commends the important contributions made by the Brazilian presidency to global climate governance, and wishes COP30 a full success. This year marks the 10th anniversary of the Paris Agreement, and global climate governance is entering a critical stage. China has made notable achievements in implementing its 2030 nationally determined contributions and achieved ahead of schedule the targets of installed capacity of wind and solar power and total forest stock. At the United Nations Climate Summit on September 24th, President Xi Jinping solemnly announced China's 2035 NDCs, covering all economic sectors and all greenhouse gases. This is the first time that China put forward an absolute emissions reduction target, which is a testament to China's firm resolve and a maximum effort. The just concluded fourth plenary session of the 20th Communist Party of China Central Committee deliberated over and adopted the recommendations for the economic and social development plan over the next 5 years. It made important arrangements for building a beautiful China and stressed that, guided by the goals of achieving peak carbon and carbon neutrality, China will make concerted efforts to cut carbon emissions, reduce pollution, pursue green development, and boost economic growth, and reinforce ecological security shields and strengthen green development drivers. China is a country that honors its commitments. China will accelerate the green transition in all areas of economic and social development, work actively and prudently toward peak carbon emissions, and make greater contributions to addressing climate change. Colleagues, humanity now stands at a new crossroads. It is imperative for all parties to uphold true multilateralism, strengthen solidarity and coordination, and make sustained progress in global climate governance. To this end, I would like to make 3 propositions. First, we should keep to the right direction. Green and low carbon transition is the trend of the times. We need to stay confident, balance such goals as environmental protection, economic development, job creation, and poverty eradication. Seek coordinated progress on livelihood improvement and climate governance, and promote high-quality development to deliver greater benefits to the people of all countries. Second, we should translate climate commitments into action. The key to addressing climate change lies in taking action. We need to abide by the principle of common but differentiated responsibilities, fully and effectively implement the UN Framework Convention on Climate Change and its Paris Agreement, and uphold international fairness and justice in the course of action and implementation. Developed countries should take the lead in fulfilling emission reduction obligations, deliver on their finance commitments, and provide more technology and capacity-building support to developing countries. Third, we should deepen openness and cooperation. The global transition toward green and low-carbon growth calls for a sound environment for international economic and trade cooperation. We need to strengthen international collaboration on green technology and industry, remove trade barriers, and ensure the free flow of quality green products to better meet the needs of global sustainable development. China is ready to work with all parties to unswervingly promote green and low-carbon development and build a beautiful world of harmony between humanity and nature. Thank you.
We would like to invite at this moment the representative from Colombia, President Gustavo Petro. I asked my team, President Lula, Antonio Guterres, the Secretary of the United Nations, and delegations of several countries all over the world. I asked my team to be more radical in order to achieve the goals of life, recognizing that we are facing a failure. Those are mild words, but they become ghosts because of the reality that we need to understand. After 29 COPs, after speeches, and some of them I gave those speeches, and also we are facing a failure. A failure can be measured by science in terms of temperature, in terms of the law of thermodynamics, and this failure, it's because, first of all, because of the lobby of the interests of oil, carbon, and gas in this assembly. And all the COPs, the wish of having gains, profits, going against life, and this is immoral. This is not human. And we're having the COPs once again, and the same lobby in some nations more than others, and they are asking for the results that can be measured. The number 1.5 degrees that we didn't want to achieve, but we have achieved. And we are closer to something that is not called a climate crisis. And we started talking about change and then a crisis, and now we are close to a climate collapse, which means the point of no return. In other words, general death of the existence in this planet. It's not an apocalypse, literary apocalypse, if you will, but it's a real apocalypse. And what are the facts that are avoiding us to achieve the goals? It's not from left wing or right wing, but it's the common goal of humankind. Number one, the lack of the United States here. And Mr. Donald Trump is not present here. the one that has personal behavior to deny science. And the society is then turning their eyes away and going towards an abyss. So Donald Trump, it's not right, because we can see the collapse that can happen if the United States does not decarbonize their economy. So it's 100% wrong. The President of the United States, Donald Trump. Number two, those that are investing in Europe in more weapons according to the GDP, and this is a mistake of Europe if they accept. It is not a problem of defense, of security. It's not Russia the enemy. It's the climate crisis the enemy. And your grandchildren, ladies and gentlemen, presidents, prime ministers, we are facing this risk also in Europe, in the whole humanity. So the death is the enemy, and then the dangers from past times like Napoleon in a Russia that is also part of Europe. Number three, we have the threats of invasion, and we're losing time, and we can see those invasions. We can see genocides. We can see threats also invading Venezuela, or maybe threats to invade Colombia, threats to invade Cuba. And also, I was considered by Trump as a leader of drug trafficking, and I was the first one to fight against drug trafficking in Colombia, increasing and seizing cocaine, and just to silence me in those events and not to face the reality. And also threats to invade Brazil, threats to invade Mexico, and also real invasion to the Colombian Caribbean, and the missiles going to Gaza Strip. We can see in poor people that are the employees of drug traffickers, or even fishermen in the speedboats in the Caribbean. More than 70 died, and breaking the rights, human rights, in terms of the proportionality of the force. So extrajudicial measures in the Caribbean, near this region here. And also continuing policies against migration done with Nazi style against our peoples, against also Arabic people, sub-Saharan people. Also continuing, we haven't seen the missiles going over the Caribbean. So those policies that are produced over those 2 years in Dubai. So we lost time. Those are ghosts in order to gain votes in the countries of power. Those that are CO2 emissions and those that are doing nothing against climate crisis. So those are excuses invented because they want to gain more money with the oil lobby, and then we get closer to the climate collapse. What do? Without a doubt, the goal cannot be a different one. As soon as possible, because it's a race against our clock. So we need to build decarbonized economy, zero carbon, zero oil, zero gas. We need to have a decarbonized economy. It's like building a life economy, an economy for life, like what we say in Costa Rica. And nowadays, literally, Mr. Trump is against humankind. not coming here, and we can see that. So Trump is against humankind. So what should we do? Should we leave him alone? Should we forget about him? Forgetting is the biggest punishment. So when we want to talk, we talk, but about life, not anything else. So what are we going to do? So I'm part of this progressive mindset, so I can say that life is our flag. We cannot have a fossil progressive mindset. So we need to define that our flag is to take humankind towards life. And that's the real goal, that's the short real goal that we have. And here in America, where I come from, in each part we can make a similar effort. We can have a concrete proposal. $500,000 in Latin America and Caribbean. From the Arabic world, you can come from China, you can come from Europe, we can receive you. You can come from the United States with $500,000. You can achieve that what is a potential now can become a reality. So we can have 1,400 giga of generation of clean energy. We have this huge potential that can become true. It is in our soil, in our winds, in our water. Also in our volcans, also. 1,400 giga every year, and Africa can do the same. If the matrix of electric energy in the United States generate 1,200 giga per year, 700%, it's fossil fuel. We can do the math. If we invest $500 million here, also cleaning 100% the energy matrix of the United States. So in other words, one important step, a crucial step, so to avoid from this crisis, to reach this climate collapse, and we need to save the existence here in planet Earth. Also, we have two other ways, Mr. President. In South America, where you are part and where I'm part, and many of us here. So in Latin America, we can propose, we have concrete proposals. So also we need resources, and we can provide resources so that we can save the forest, which is the third climate pillar of the world, just like the columns of Hercules. And they can hold life in this planet, and paying tribute to the world biodiversity. So in Andes, where those rivers are born, the biggest one that crosses this region, connecting with the Atlantic Ocean, also producing this beauty. If we save the Amazon forest, if we reach the natural border, and if we revitalize it, we will be contributing to the life of humankind, which means that we are going to see forests where we don't have it. So Colombia, before we had 80,000 hectares of plantations of cocaine, but now abandoned, and now they can become a forest again. And between the mountains and also between the rivers, and that's where the river comes from. And if we don't have that in Venezuela, in Colombia, in Bolivia, in Peru, We will not have a standing tree. And here, Belém do Pará will become a desert, and also the existence. We know that we have reached this point of climate collapse, and also the first charter that South America produced so that we can help each other, we can save life. We don't need the North to do so, we need humankind. And number two, without a doubt, we can clean the dirty matrix of electric generation, the generation of energy of the United States, accumulator of CO2, the biggest one in the world, and responsible for the crisis and the possibility of climate collapse. So what do we need? We need $500 million, and also having this energy production, but clean energy, we need to be.
C'est ce rendez-vous annuel, le 30e de la série, depuis que cette série de réflexions a commencé sur le réchauffement climatique. Et cette fois, c'est une saveur particulière parce qu'elle se déroule d'abord dans un pays qui regorge la plus grande forêt du monde, l'Amazonie, et la République démocratique du Congo vient juste après le Brésil avec ses 155 millions d'hectares de la forêt équatoriale. Donc le bassin du Congo, c'est le deuxième plus grand bassin du monde après celui de l'Amazonie. Donc nous sommes ici pour vous faire vivre tout ce grand moment, et pendant que vous nous suivez sur toutes nos plateformes de la présidence de la République, veuillez transmettre ce message, veuillez donc nous suivre de plus près parce que je ne serai pas seul. Félix Kabala est avec moi. Bonjour Félix. Nous sommes ici dans les coulisses de la COP30. La conférence annuelle sur le réchauffement climatique, un rendez-vous de chaque année. Voilà pourquoi on en est aujourd'hui au 30e rendez-vous. Et l'année prochaine, on passera au 31e, ainsi de suite. Mais tout ça pour une réflexion qui devrait amener le monde à prendre des décisions sur cette question du réchauffement climatique. Depuis que ces réflexions ont commencé, on a même l'impression que le réchauffement s'est accéléré et chaque année, c'est des records en record. 2024 a été présenté, Félix Kabala, comme étant l'année la plus chaude. Et pourtant, en 2025, on est en train d'aller vers un autre record. Et peut-être que ce sera comme ça chaque année. Et voilà pourquoi les décideurs doivent passer à une autre phase, une phase pratique, celle de la prise de décision.
Merci beaucoup Giscard Poussema pour cette brève introduction de cette conférence sur le climat. Vous savez, Belem, cette ville qui existe depuis plus de 450 ans, selon les recherches des informations.
C'est au XVIe siècle, je vais donner l'année exacte, c'est en 1600, c'est envers 1615 que cette ville a été construite.
Fondée même.
A été fondée en pleine forêt, en pleine Amazonie. Nous sommes ici à 100 km de l'océan Atlantique, mais on est dans l'estuaire de deux grands fleuves aussi grands que le fleuve Congo. Nous sommes donc dans cet estuaire, c'est cet élément. Et donc, je vais parler effectivement, nous sommes ici à Belem.
Exactement, vous savez, Belem, la COP30, 30 ans après le lancement de la conférence sur le climat, aujourd'hui, Belem se veut résilient parce que Belem fait face à lorsque vous regardez même la logistique imposante mise en place par le pays hôte, vous sentez que dans cette organisation, ce mastodonte qui reçoit le monde entier pour parler de la question du réchauffement climatique est très important parce que ces grands défis auxquels ils font face, ce sont des défis d'ordre géopolitique avec de tensions sur plusieurs coins de cette planète, en Ukraine, au Liban, à Gaza, en République démocratique du Congo.
Oui, la politique s'invite ici alors que le thème principal c'est le climat. Je vais rebondir sur un petit détail important que vous venez de donner. L'organisation de la COP, c'est d'abord la logistique.
Exact.
Aujourd'hui, lorsqu'on sait qu'il y a 180 pays qui sont représentés ici avec des fortes délégations, trouver une ville qui peut avoir un nombre aussi important, c'est un grand défi. C'est comme si on venait à la Coupe du Monde. Et d'ailleurs, en termes d'invités, une COP reçoit plus de personnes parce que c'est au moins 30 000 personnes tous les jours qui viennent pour le débat. Et déjà, nous allons avoir d'ici quelques instants les statistiques officielles sur le nombre de chefs d'État, mais déjà dans les coulisses, nous venons d'apprendre que cette COP a battu les records de la représentativité des chefs d'État parce qu'en ce moment, non loin de ce studio de fortune, des chefs d'État et des gouvernements sont réunis pour un sommet qui précède la COP elle-même. Aujourd'hui, nous sommes le 6, jeudi 6 et vendredi 7. Ces 2 jours sont consacrés à un sommet. Les sommets, donc, ça signifie que c'est des représentants de haut niveau, ce sont des chefs d'État, un sommet sur le climat. Et ce sont eux qui vont donner
les grandes orientations, les prises de décision
et qui seront maintenant
mises en œuvre.
Exactement, détaillées au niveau de la COP elle-même qui
fera rapport au monde entier.
Et donc, aujourd'hui, l'organisation d'une COP, la COP, c'est le plus grand événement après l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies en termes d'affluence. Imaginez-vous que l'Assemblée générale des Nations Unies a lieu dans la ville de New York, une ville avec ses gratte-ciel qui a la capacité d'accueillir tout le monde, mais pour accueillir une COP, c'est un grand défi. Alors, chapeau bas à Lula da Silva, qui a réussi à redonner vie à une vieille ville, la première d'ailleurs, construite en 1600, donc c'est au XVIe siècle. Et c'est d'ailleurs l'histoire, vous pouvez aller vérifier sur Internet, c'est ici que la colonisation européenne, c'est la première ville colonisée par l'Europe. Vous pouvez le vérifier. Donc c'est une très vieille ville, la toute première, en tout cas dans cette zone sud-américaine. Et cette ville qui, il y a 2 ans, ne ressemblait à rien, nous avons été ici. Et les médias ne cessaient de parler de cette transformation. En l'espace de 2-3 ans, cette ville s'est transformée. J'allais pas parler des gratte-ciel, mais en tout cas, il y a, en termes d'accommodation, en termes de route, en termes de confort, et même dans ces grands hangars sur plusieurs terrains de football. Donc, et c'est ici, nous ne sommes pas dans un immeuble, nous ne sommes pas dans un immeuble construit, j'allais dire, de manière moderne, mais ici c'est fastidieux ce qui a été fait, c'est un grand défi. Et on a même vu que le président Lula da Silva, l'hôte de marque, les plans d'énergie, lui-même était debout pour accueillir ses homologues. Alors nous allons parler, Félix Abala,
de ces
défis-là, de la participation d'abord.
Oui, effectivement.
Le président de la République, vous avez été à l'aéroport aux premières heures de la journée. Le président de la République, Felix Tshisekedi est arrivé ici à Belem d'Opara, après avoir parcouru plusieurs kilomètres. Le chef de l'État est allé puiser dans ses dernières énergies pour venir faire entendre la voix de la République démocratique du Congo. Et pourquoi le chef de l'État est là? D'abord, Félix Kabala, parce que en plus de l'Amazonie, le bassin du Congo, c'est le plus grand poumon mondial. Et lorsqu'on parle climat, avec tous les enjeux, avec toutes les interrogations, la République démocratique du Congo ne peut pas, et ne pouvait pas, et n'a pas raté cette occasion. Et donc le président de la République a une solution, parce que la RDC est présentée comme le pays solution. Aujourd'hui, face à ces climats, toutes les études ont démontré que seuls ces bassins forestiers peuvent apporter une solution. Et donc le président de la République est venu ici, c'est vrai, pays solution chaque année, les discours est toujours le même, mais cette fois, je crois qu'on serait plus pragmatique.
Oui, je pense que le narratif que la République démocratique du Congo apporte à cette COP 30 par le canal de son Excellence, Monsieur le Président de la République, avec un grand slogan que nous avons transformé en réalité, parce que jadis hier, la République démocratique du Congo jouait aux abonnés absents. Aujourd'hui, avec les enjeux que représente le changement climatique,
well-being in all countries. But we know that these risks often fall hardest on those who contributed least to the crisis. This demands urgent, coordinated action. We must ask ourselves, what legacy do we wish to leave? Because the impact of all our choices will be felt by us all around the world, in the safety of their homes, the stability of their livelihoods, and the health of the natural world that sustains us all. The road ahead will be tough. We must transform the way we power our lives, produce our goods, move from place to place, and care for our land. But this is not just a challenge, it is a profound opportunity. An opportunity to build cleaner economies, restore nature, and improve the health and well-being of communities everywhere. It is an opportunity to grow our economies, develop new technologies, and create secure and affordable energy systems that are central to our future prosperity and security. Action on climate not only protects future generations, but is a powerful engine to create better jobs and lives today. We need to work together to build resilience from the escalating costs of climate change and become nature positive. This means incentivizing protection and restoration, not destruction. It means recognizing nature's true value, not only in economic terms, but in its ability to sustain life, culture, and community for everyone to enjoy. As we stand together in the heart of the Amazon, a region not only vital to global climate stability, but also home to indigenous communities who have safeguarded these forests for generations, we are reminded that true climate leadership means listening to those who have lived in harmony with nature and empowering them as stewards of the planet's most precious ecosystems. At London Climate Action Week, I convened governments, philanthropists, and indigenous leaders to issue a call to action for land tenure and forest finance pledges to be delivered at COP30 here in Brazil. That call to action continued through New York Climate Week in September and brings us here to Belem, where we must listen to the voices and leadership of indigenous people and local communities who care for half of the world's land and a third of its remaining intact forests. Their territories are vital to climate mitigation and biodiversity preservation, yet only 11% of this land is legally recognized. Where indigenous people and local communities have secured land rights, deforestation is lower, biodiversity is richer, and carbon is better stored. Yet nearly 800 million hectares of their land remain unrecognized. 10-year security empowers communities to resist harmful projects and pursue sustainable livelihoods. This is not just a moral imperative, it's a practical climate solution to the climate and biodiversity challenges our planet faces. Let us build a future where indigenous people and local communities are recognized as global climate leaders, where their rights are protected, their voices heard, and their knowledge respected as vital to the health of our planet. This week in Rio, I had the privilege of meeting representatives from indigenous people and local communities at events hosted by the Earthshot Prize and the Royal Foundation's United for Wildlife program. Their connection with and tireless efforts to protect nature are nothing short of inspiring.
Et les deux ont gardé des contacts et cette dynamique est en train de...
Moi, je pense même que le président Lula voit très clairement à travers le président Tshisekedi un allié de taille. Parce que on doit se le, dans cette lutte pour le changement climatique, parce qu'on doit se le dire honnêtement que le Brésil y a mis beaucoup de moyens, énormément de moyens, et c'est tout à fait normal que pour que ces efforts puissent avoir des résultats escomptés, il faut se faire des alliés. Les alliés d'abord naturels, comme la République démocratique du Congo avec son bassin du fleuve Congo, et l'Indonésie de l'autre côté avec sa forêt Bornéo. Alors, moi je pense que ces trois acteurs dans la triangulaire qu'ils sont en train de mettre en place doivent régulièrement inviter les acteurs, les grands acteurs, ceux qui ont découvert cette calamité climatique qui ne cesse de frapper à nos portes, pour lesquels nous voyons les résultats néfastes du réchauffement climatique, parce que les émissions de gaz à effet de serre sont en train de causer des grandes calamités, des grands sinistres pour lesquels, si les politiques ne prennent pas à bras le corps des décisions qui s'imposent, je crois que c'est toute l'humanité qui est menacée. Et je crois que ces trois nations, exactement, avec toutes les autres nations du monde, ont ce leadership naturel à pouvoir dire devant tout le monde que si on ne se met pas tous ensemble pour prendre les bonnes décisions, ce sont les populations du monde entier qui sont en danger permanent. Et vous savez, la non-insistance à la personne en danger, c'est nous-mêmes, en tant qu'humains, nous risquons de nous tirer nous-mêmes la balle dans le pied, là où on peut donner une solution à ce problème.
Les décomptes est annuel. Nous étions à la COP 29. C'était en Azerbaïdjan, dans la belle ville de Bakou. Avant cela, la COP 28 avait été organisée à Dubaï, aux Émirats Arabes Unis. La COP 30, c'est à Belem, en plein forêt de l'Amazonie, c'est en Amérique latine. Et c'est une COP qui a une sensation particulière. En tout cas, en termes de détermination, on voit, en termes d'engouement également, en termes de défis. Nous avons parlé de cette ville, chapeau bas au Brésil, pour ces miracles. Nous devons l'appeler comme ça. Cette ville, pour ceux qui l'ont visitée il y a 2 ans, c'était un champ de ruines en fait. Une ville qui se trouve au nord, il faut 4 heures de vol. 4 heures pour ceux qui prennent l'avion de Sao Paulo jusqu'ici à Belem.
3h30.
3h30, presque 4 heures de vol. Et pour ceux qui viennent en véhicule, alors qu'il y a de très belles routes, ils mettent une semaine. Donc, les Congolais vivant ici à Brasilia ou à Sao Paulo ont mis une semaine dans des bons véhicules, sur des bonnes routes pour arriver ici. Donc, c'est dire combien ce pays est immense, combien la ville de Belem do Pará est excentrée du reste du Brésil. Lorsque vous allez sur la carte, vous allez voir effectivement, nous ne sommes qu'à proximité de l'océan Atlantique, un peu plus au nord et en pleine forêt. Donc, c'est une ville qui est la capitale de l'État du Pará. Donc, le Brésil est encore un État fédéral. Il est constitué de plusieurs États et parmi ces États, il y a celui du Pará. C'est pourquoi on parle de la ville de Belem do Pará. Et Belem lui-même, lorsque nous avons été fouillés dans nos recherches, Belem n'est que la déformation de Bethléem. C'est une ville essentiellement chrétienne et Belem, c'est Bethléem, la ville de naissance de Jésus-Christ, en référence à la ville de naissance de Jésus-Christ. Bethléem, et en portugais, c'est Belem. Et ici, on aime parler de Belem do Pará, pour faire la différence avec l'autre Bethléem, Et donc ici, on est à Bethléem.
Et il faut aussi également
Bethléem
souligner que
de
le
l'État
Brésil,
du Para. Voilà pourquoi on parle de Belem de Para.
il faut vraiment souligner que le Brésil est un État profondément chrétien.
C'est le plus grand pays
Et,
catholique au monde, je crois.
Nous avions observé et vu combien est-ce que les Brésiliens sont croyants, pratiquants. Et je pense que d'une manière ou d'une autre, c'est quand même un modèle à copier.
Ouais,
dans
surtout en termes de reconstruction. Aujourd'hui, lorsque vous traversez la ville de Belem, vous avez deux mondes. Vous avez la modernité qui côtoie l'Antiquité. L'Antiquité, c'est ces bâtiments du XVIe siècle, avec les ports au niveau du Mercado de Verso. Ça, c'est le plus grand marché le long du fleuve local. Et là, vous avez vraiment des infrastructures du XVIe siècle. Et lorsque vous avancez au centre-ville, vous voyez des belles constructions, la modernité, hein, les routes qui sont modernisées. Vraiment une ville où modernité côtoie l'Antiquité. Et tout ça pour le plus grand bien de l'histoire. Juste un million d'habitants, c'est
déjà énorme.
Voilà, c'est déjà. Bon, en tout cas, il y a de la place ici à Belem de Para où nous nous trouvons. Mesdames et messieurs, restez branchés. Le président de la République, Felix Tshisekedi est allé puiser dans ses énergies pour venir prendre la parole ici. On ne peut pas aujourd'hui faire une réflexion sur le réchauffement climatique sans la République démocratique du Congo. Pour le 29 édition précédente, et c'était ça l'erreur de la République démocratique du Congo, lorsque c'est le président Felix Tshisekedi qui a donné de la valeur à cette question climatique en participant à COP. Parce que bien avant, aller poser la question pendant 18 ans et même avant, aucun chef d'État. Et donc on parlait des forêts, du bassin du Congo, sans la République démocratique du Congo. Et donc d'autres États en ont profité pour faire asseoir leur leadership.
Directeur
je ne peux pas vous dire aujourd'hui. Oui.
J'aimerais juste ouvrir une petite parenthèse qui est anecdotique.
Ouais.
Il y a quelqu'un qui m'écrit sur le réseau, sur mon profil, qui me dit dans notre langue nationale, intérêt à peuple ezanini na likambango ya climat.
Ça va expliquer bango intérêt ya peuple.
Bana Congo. Lelo soki bomoni mokonzi ya mboka alongwe mboka na biso Congo, mboka mosika po aya basolola masolo etali climat. Po omoni climat na kobenga yango ndenge nini? Oyo nyonso tu bomonaka mipepe ya mbula eyaka mbula ebeti bato bazozinda
na Kinshasa
tozomona bambula ebele na koexplike intérêt nango eza nini na ndenge mwa mokuse. Bamboka mosusu ya bapaya oyo bazali na mwa makoki ebele koleka biso, ntango batimbolaka na se ya mabele biloko bango batimbolaka na se ya mabele ezongisaka mwa milinga likolo. Milinga wana nabengi yango milinga mpo nani? Parceke na lingala na koyanola yango malamu te, yango nde tobengi bagaz à effet de serre, c'est-à-dire ezomata likolo. Sikoyo likolo na mapata biso tozalaka na couche oyo tobengaka atmosphère. Atmosphère na biso ezalaka na couche d'ozone na kati. Couche d'ozone eprotegeaka biso. Lelo soki couche d'ozone wana eza te, tokozika biso nyonso tokokoma makala. Alors oyo biso bato ya mokili tozosala ezokende kuna likolo ezobebisa couche d'ozone. Yango moto esala ke bozomona bisika mosusu bambula mosusu ezobeta ezomema na biloko nyonso. Mais lelo soki baye awa, mokonzi ya mboka ye awa, eza mpona kobeta masolo bakitisa mwa misala wana ya makasi oyo ezobebisa mabele, ezotinda milinga likolo bagaz wana oyo ezobebisa couche d'ozone, mpo ete soki mbula ebeti biso na Kinshasa toyebaka mpe ke mbula ebebisa biso te, ebebisa biloko na biso te, tozindaka te. Yango wana bokomprendre wana sens wana eza bénéfice mpona biso.
Mpe na bakisa effectivement bakongolais esengeli bayeba likambo oyo ndeko na ngai Félix Kabala auti kolimbolela bino awa. Lelo mokili soki botali mpenza omona ke rythme ya vie eza so ndenge ezalaki kala te tala neti na Kinshasa toyebi ke mbula ebandaka na septembre.
Exact.
Banda septembre ti mokolo ya lelo 6 novembre encore koki kozwa je crois mbula ebeti 2 ou 3 fois ezalaka te et pourtant kala te na janvier awa tokota na mwa elanga moke tobenga yango elanga moke petite saison sèche.
Exact.
Nyonso wana eza baeffet ya réchauffement climatique et puis tala boniboni ata lelo mbula ebeti omona badega lokola oyo euti nyonso wana eza baeffet. Soki mpe bozotambola na bamboka omona bamai mosusu ekomi kokauka bamai zokauka bakartier ebelenga na bi par exemple na Mimosa.
Oui.
Na Mimosa place snel atonga nini me kala mai ezalaka wana ezotambola lelo soki okokuta mai
Pe en plus
mai ekauka
bayebaka gaz wana ere elongwaka na mabele ezokende likolo na couche d'ozone selon bascientifique etikalaka esika moko te etambolaka ezwaka direction moko boye ezotambola soki etelemi esika moko boye ekekutani ke mbula ye wana soki bozalaki protégé bien te bokomona ke mbula ebele ekokweya ememi maduro ebele
epuis oyebi ke ntango bato ya mayele basangani babi eloko oyo fo totala yango malamu ebanda kala lelo tokomi na COP 30 ça signifie que ça fait 30 ans balobelaka likambo Congo toza kuna te toyebi yango te président Felix
18 ans
eloko te tokendaka te tolobaka pe te nzoka nde badécision ezozwama bayebi ke Congo parce que wana eza réalité Congo nzambe apesa biso do wana tozali na moko ya bazamba ya monene na mboka donc nsima ya Amazonie eza nde forêt na biso
en plus toza na 10% ya bamai ya kitoko
bamai ya monde mobimba 10 monde mobimba
allez-y comprendre
makambo elobamaka awa bato bayaka te bato bayaka balobaka yango ko président Félix Antoine Tshisekedi abi te likambo tokotika boye te abi mais solution ya mo surprise ya liboso to ya boye tokokuta non voisin na biso moko azwani leadership doso babi bassin du Congo babi ezanga etango ayaka mpe ye moko abendaka mpe mbongo tolobango mbongo mpe ebimaka masolo ya bazamba ya forêt équatoriale balobaka yango et voilà pourquoi donc le président de la République a dit non makambo il faut échanger donc soki bomoni mokonzi ya mboka auti aza kolemba ako aza mutu auti Dubaï auti pardon auti Doha avant Doha autaki Égypte autaki na France nyonso na kaka mpona koluka basolution mpona Congo donc soki bomoni alongwe Doha après 15 heures de vol à Eti Awa parce que c'est
les enjeux sont très importants
très importants awa bazolobela makambo ya baforêt
mais
et imaginez-vous président non avant ni na ye
directeur
pour apesa bato plaisir
directeur voisin na biso nasepelaki na eloko moko voisin na biso depuis président Tshisekedi azwi bokonzi na mboka akoma osola na président bayaka masolo oyo ensemble mpo ndambu ya zamba na biso ezalaka mpe epa na ye ya monene nde eza epa na biso 80%. C'est clair lelo oyo nga nakoki mpenza kokondane ye te na passé wana parce que eza biso moko moto créaki vide wana parce que vide wana tocréaki il fallait voir c'était quel leadership on avait à la tête de ce pays la République démocratique du Congo. Alors avec le président Tshisekedi aye lokola aza moto alingaka kosala na bato akatisi ebale ake komona papa oyo aye akomona kulutu oyo aye abengaki mon papa excellence.
Et c'est d'ailleurs lui le président
mon papa excellence
Force à constater que ces forêts sont aujourd'hui
parce que le bassin du Congo c'est pas seulement la RDC.
Understand that the forests are in danger today. As the Paris Agreement says, it is the time to act is now. And we need to honor the commitments that we have made. Ladies and gentlemen, these scientists are unanimous. If we fail to limit the increase in global temperature to 1.5 degrees Celsius, the damages will become irreversible for human lives, for ecosystems, and for our respective economies. The climate crisis is not just environmental. It's also a crisis of justice and equity. Those who have contributed the least to the climate crisis today pay the highest price. Our populations are being hit by floods, extreme droughts, food insecurity, and erosion. During this time, financing has been insufficient, fragmented, and many times failing. I call on a rebalance between finance that is going towards transition and towards adaptation. Today, we need to act to protect people, not just promising things for tomorrow. And the effective implementation of loss and damages with financing forever is essential. Ladies and gentlemen, I'd like to recall that Congo is a country that provides solutions due to its great environmental heritage. We have a country that is rich in carbon, biodiversity, and water with standing forests. Our country is also in the heart of the
Kinshasa.
planetary climate
Il s'agit
regulation.
en effet d'une approche territoriale intégrée de conservation des paysages couvrant plus de 540 000 km², dont plus de 100 renforce les droits des populations locales et organise une économie circulaire fondée sur la forêt et non contre la forêt. La République démocratique du Congo est ainsi l'un des rares pays au monde à avoir déjà consacré plus de 30% de son territoire à la conservation. Sur le plan institutionnel, nous avons engagé des réformes majeures pour assurer la transparence et la crédibilité du marché de carbone, notamment avec la création d'une autorité de régulation. Dans la même perspective, je voudrais saluer l'initiative brésilienne Tropical Forest Forever Facility. Mon pays est disposé à coopérer avec le Brésil et d'autres partenaires impliqués pour la réussite de celle-ci. Mesdames et messieurs, la République démocratique du Congo porte légitimement l'ambition d'être un pôle énergétique propre pour l'Afrique. Nous disposons d'un potentiel hydroélectrique exceptionnel avec plus de 44 000 mégawatts sur le seul site du Grand Tinga. Ce potentiel est destiné non seulement à alimenter notre économie nationale, mais aussi à contribuer à l'électrification verte du continent africain. L'Agence nationale de l'électrification et des services énergétiques en milieu rural et périurbain en sert en Mon pays est engagé à augmenter l'agression que subit mon pays est aussi une guerre écologique en ce qu'elle détruit nos forêts, nos aires protégées, nos parcs. Mon pays comprend donc la pleine portée de l'initiative de Vanuatu, de Fidji et de Samoa visant à reconnaître l'écocide comme un crime international autonome. détruire délibérément une forêt primaire, une tourbière millénaire ou une aire protégée essentielle au stockage de carbone revient à compromettre l'avenir de l'humanité. Mesdames et messieurs, distingués invités, comme je l'ai mentionné à l'entame de mon propos, nous devons agir. Je recommande l'application effective des engagements pris à bas coût, en l'occurrence le décaissement des 300 milliards de dollars par an. Je formule vivement le vœu que la COP30, ici à Belem, marque un départ dans notre volonté commune de léguer aux générations futures une planète où il fera beau vivre. Pour ce faire, il nous faut agir maintenant dans un cadre multilatéral fondé sur le respect des engagements, la justice climatique et l'équité. Je vous remercie.
Fará uso da palavra o senhor Eduardo Martínez, vice-primeiro-ministro de Cuba.
Querido presidente Lula, distinguido